Welcome again to this channel, where we honor the lives and legacies of those who once lit up the world with their talent. Hollywood has seen its fair share of heartbreak, as some of its brightest stars left us far too soon. Their journeys were filled with success, fame, and admiration, yet behind the glamour, they battled struggles that ultimately took them away. Today, we pay tribute to the American female celebrities who tragically lost their lives due to overdose, icons whose brilliance still echoes through time. Marilyn Monroe, the golden-haired beauty who captivated the world with her charm, wit, and mesmerizing presence, met a tragic and lonely end on August 4, 1962, at just 36 years old. Found lifeless in her Los Angeles home, her hand still gripping a telephone, Monroe's death was ruled as a probable suicide caused by acute barbiturate poisoning, though speculation and mystery still shroud the final moments of her life. In the weeks leading up to her death, she was battling intense personal turmoil, her fragile emotional state unraveling under the weight of Hollywood's relentless pressures and her own inner demons. Struggling with depression, failed relationships, and professional setbacks, Marilyn had become increasingly reliant on prescription drugs. The night of August 4th, she was alone in her bedroom when her housekeeper sensed something was wrong, seeing light under the door, but getting no response. Hours later, her psychiatrist broke in through the window, only to find the world's most famous woman lifeless in her bed, surrounded by empty pill bottles. Marilyn Monroe had spent her final days isolated, disconnected, and desperately trying to hold onto a sense of purpose. Yet the world she had enchanted seemed to slip away from her grasp. Born as Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, Marilyn's early life was marred by instability, moving between foster homes and orphanages, never knowing the comfort of a stable family. Despite her troubled upbringing, she transformed herself into the ultimate Hollywood star, a symbol of beauty, desire, and the epitome of glamour. Her journey to stardom began when she was discovered while working in a factory during World War II, leading her to modeling and eventually the silver screen. She quickly became a sensation, starring in classics like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Some Like It Hot, and The 7-Year Itch, films that cemented her as an icon. But behind the dazzling smile and the blonde bombshell persona was a woman deeply misunderstood, craving love, respect, and recognition beyond her physical appeal. Marilyn fought against the industry that tried to box her into shallow roles, even founding her own production company in an attempt to take control of her career. Despite her success, her personal life was tumultuous. Her marriages to Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller ended in heartbreak, and she often found herself battling anxiety, loneliness, and addiction. The pressures of fame, the constant scrutiny, and the emotional toll of feeling like a pawn in Hollywood's game weighed heavily on her. In her final months, she was dismissed from her last film, Something's Got to Give, due to her erratic behavior and declining health, adding to her spiraling despair. Her sudden death sent shockwaves around the world, leaving behind unanswered questions, conspiracy theories, and an everlasting legacy. Marilyn Monroe was more than a star. She was a woman who fought for her place in an industry that often reduced her to an image, a person who longed for genuine connection but found herself trapped in the loneliness of fame. Decades later, she remains an icon, a tragic reminder of the cost of stardom, and a woman whose legacy is forever etched in the golden history of Hollywood. Though her life was cut short, Marilyn Monroe's influence endures, her beauty, her pain, and her story continuing to captivate generations who see in her both the magic and the sorrow of a woman who had it all, but was still searching for something more. Edie Sedgwick, the dazzling yet deeply troubled socialite, actress, and model, was a tragic figure who captivated the world in the 1960s, only to meet an untimely and heartbreaking end at just 28 years old. She had once been the shining star of Andy Warhol's factory scene, an it girl who embodied the rebellious, glamorous spirit of the era. But behind the flashing cameras and the whirlwind parties, Edie struggled with profound emotional pain, drug addiction, and a deep sense of emptiness that would eventually consume her. On the night of November 15, 1971, Edie attended a fashion show at the Santa Barbara Museum. then went to a party where she drank heavily. Feeling uneasy, she called her husband, Michael Post, to pick her up. On the way home, she voiced her doubts about their marriage, a foreboding sign of the inner turmoil she could never seem to escape. Later that night, Post gave her the medication she had been prescribed, hoping it would help her sleep. But something was wrong. Her breathing was labored, a deep, unsettling sound that should have been a warning. He thought it was her smoking habit, so he went to sleep, unaware that by morning, she would be gone. At just 7:30 a.m., Post awoke to find Edie lifeless beside him. The official cause of death was acute barbiturate intoxication, a lethal mix of drugs and alcohol that blurred the line between accident and suicide. Her life had been one of extremes, privilege and neglect, adoration and abandonment, fame and self-destruction. Born into an elite but emotionally cold family in Santa Barbara, California, Edie was raised in isolation on her father's vast ranch, where she and her siblings lived under strict, almost oppressive control. Her father, Francis Sedwick, was a wealthy rancher and sculptor, but he was also a domineering and deeply flawed man. His extramarital affairs and emotional cruelty left permanent scars on Edie, who later accused him of attempting to molest her as a child. Her struggles with mental health started young. By her early teens, she developed an eating disorder, cycling through dangerous patterns of starvation and binging. At just 13, she was pulled from school because of her declining health, and by the time she was in her late teens, she had already spent time in psychiatric institutions battling anorexia and depression. The deaths of her two older brothers, one by suicide and the other in a motorcycle crash, only deepened her suffering. When Edie moved to New York City in 1964, she was looking for an escape, a new identity, and in Andy Warhol, she found someone who saw her as the ultimate muse. With her waif-like figure, striking eyes, and platinum blonde hair, she became a star in Warhol's experimental films, dazzling audiences with her effortless cool and hypnotic presence. But Warhol's world was fueled by excess, drugs, parties, and a toxic mix of fame and exploitation. Edie, who had already been battling addiction, spiraled further into a life of heavy drug use, particularly amphetamines. Her relationship with Warhol soured, and by 1966, she had cut ties with him, hoping to carve out a serious acting career. But Hollywood never embraced her the way Warhol's world had, and soon her personal life unraveled. She had brief, intense relationships, including a rumored affair with Bob Dylan, but heartbreak and addiction followed her everywhere. By the late 1960s, Edie was a shell of her former self, in and out of psychiatric hospitals, overdosing multiple times, and struggling to find any sense of stability. Her last hope seemed to come in 1971 when she married Michael Post and attempted to turn her life around. She had briefly sobered up, finishing the semi-autobiographical film Chow Manhattan, which chronicled a fictionalized version of her own descent. But the past was never far behind, and the demons that had haunted her for years returned. Just 4 months into her marriage, she was gone. Buried in a quiet cemetery in California, far from the glittering chaos of New York, Edie Sedgwick's story remains one of the most tragic of her time. A woman who had everything and nothing all at once. Her beauty and charm made her a legend, but the pain she carried inside was too heavy for even the brightest spotlight to hide. Anissa Jones was just 18 when her life came to a tragic and heartbreaking end on August 28, 1976, found lifeless in a friend's house after what was described as one of the most severe drug overdoses the San Diego County coroner had ever seen. The young actress, who once charmed audiences as Buffy on Family Affair, had struggled with the pressure of early fame, the loss of her career, and the pain of feeling discarded by Hollywood. That night, she had been partying with a group of friends, a mix of teenagers and young adults, unaware that it would be her last. By morning, she was gone, the toxic mix of cocaine, PCP, Quaaludes, and Seconal in her system proving too much for her body to handle. Her final days were filled with reckless choices, the excitement of newfound independence after gaining control of her finances, and the numbing effect of substances that, in the end, silenced a young life filled with promise. Anissa was born on March 11, 1958 in West Lafayette, Indiana, and spent her early childhood in West Virginia before her family moved to California. Acting seemed to come naturally to her, and by the age of 6, she was appearing in commercials. At 8, she landed the role that made her famous, Buffy Davis, the adorable twin on Family Affair. The show was a massive hit, and Anissa became a household name, instantly recognizable with her signature pigtailed look and beloved doll, Mrs. Beasley. But behind the scenes, the realities of child stardom took a toll. When Family Affair ended in 1971, Anissa was just 12 years old, and Hollywood no longer had a place for her. She was typecast, audition rejections piled up, and she found herself lost in a world where she had once been the center of attention. She tried to return to a normal life, even working at a donut shop, but the damage had already been done. The industry that had adored her had moved on, and without guidance or purpose, Anissa spiraled into a dangerous lifestyle. She refused a role in The Little People, turned down Taxi Driver, and missed out on Pretty Baby, either by choice or because she was already slipping too far into addiction. Her father passed away from heart disease. Her parents' divorce had long fractured the family, and soon she was hanging out with the wrong crowd. When she turned 18, she came into a substantial sum of money from her Family Affair earnings, and instead of using it as a fresh start, it fueled her reckless behavior. The money was spent on fast cars, expensive shopping sprees, and most tragically, a never-ending supply of drugs. Just 6 days after her death, the doctor who had prescribed her Seconal was arrested for illegally providing drugs to young people, including Anissa. He would die of illness just months later, before facing trial. The lawsuit against his estate later determined that while he was 30% responsible, Anissa herself was deemed 70% accountable for her own demise. Her mother, the last surviving member of her immediate family, passed away in 2012, leaving no one to tell Anissa's story but the fans who still remember her as Buffy. Her life became another cautionary tale of young actors used by Hollywood and abandoned when they were no longer profitable. The bright-eyed little girl who once lit up television screens with her innocence and charm had been left to fade away in the shadows, her life cut short by an industry that didn't know how to care for the children it made famous. Her ashes were scattered over the Pacific Ocean, a silent goodbye to a girl who never got the chance to grow up. Margot Hemingway was a name that once lit up the fashion world, a face that graced the covers of Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and Time, a supermodel who signed $1 million contract with Fabergé, and a woman who seemed to have it all: beauty, fame, and a name tied to literary royalty. But behind the dazzling smiles and glamorous covers, her life was a storm of struggles that eventually led to her tragic end. On July 1, 1996, she was found dead in her Santa Monica apartment, a victim of a fatal overdose of phenobarbital. Her body had been there for days, so long that dental records were needed to confirm her identity. It was a heartbreaking end to a life that had been marked by addiction, mental health battles, and a desperate search for meaning. Margot was born into privilege. Her grandfather was the legendary writer Ernest Hemingway, and with that name came great expectations. She grew up in Idaho, living on the family farm, and while her childhood seemed idyllic on the surface, deep wounds ran beneath. She struggled with depression, epilepsy, dyslexia, and bulimia, and later in life, she accused her father of sexual abuse, claims that led to estrangement from her family. Despite the pain she carried, she made a name for herself in the modeling world, becoming one of the first supermodels and making history with $1 million deal at just 21. Hollywood came calling, and she starred in the controversial film Lipstick. But while her younger sister Mariel soared in the acting world, Margot's career began to slip. She turned to alcohol to cope with her insecurities and the weight of expectations, and soon, her once glittering life started to unravel. 2 failed marriages, a stint at the Betty Ford Center, and a desperate attempt to reclaim her career led to disappointment after disappointment. By the time she was in her 40s, she was living alone in a small studio apartment, no husband, no children, and very few friends left. Those who knew her said she had been doing better, that she had seemed hopeful, but depression is a quiet predator. The demons she had fought for years finally consumed her. Her sister Mariel initially refused to believe it was suicide, clinging to the hope that it had been an accident. But as time passed, the truth became undeniable. The Hemingway family had always been haunted by tragedy. Her grandfather, Ernest Hemingway, had taken his own life, as had other members of their family. And now Margot had become part of that heartbreaking legacy. Her death was not just the loss of a once famous model and actress. It was the tragic conclusion of a life filled with pain. A life that, despite its bright moments, was overshadowed by sorrow. She was laid to rest in the Hemingway family plot in Ketchum, Idaho, bringing her back to the land where she had once been a carefree girl before the world took its toll. Margot Hemingway's story is one of beauty and pain, of fame and downfall, of a woman who had everything on the outside but was fighting invisible battles on the inside. In the end, she became yet another victim of the darkness that had followed her family for generations. Dana Plato was a name that millions recognized from their television screens. A bright young star who played Kimberly Drummond on the hit sitcom Different Strokes, capturing hearts with her charm and warmth. But behind the Hollywood glamour was a life riddled with struggles that eventually led to her tragic death. On May 8, 1999, at just 34 years old, Dana was found lifeless in a motorhome parked outside her fiance's mother's house in Moore, Oklahoma. The cause? An overdose of painkillers and muscle relaxants. Initially, many believed it was an accident, but soon, it was ruled a suicide, an end that seemed almost inevitable given the downward spiral of her life. In her final days, she tried to convince the world she was okay, making an appearance on The Howard Stern Show just a day before her death. She spoke about her past mistakes, her battle with addiction, and her efforts to turn things around. But listeners weren't kind. Callers insulted her, accused her of being high, and questioned her sobriety. She was visibly upset, but insisted she was clean. Whether she truly was or just trying to hold on to whatever dignity she had left, we may never know. The next day, she told her fans, Robert Mankaka, that she wasn't feeling well. She took her prescribed medication, went to lie down, and never woke up. Her passing wasn't just the loss of a former child star. It was another heartbreaking chapter in the tragic stories of young actors who found fame too soon and struggled to cope with life after the spotlight faded. But before it all fell apart, Dana's story started like so many others. A young girl with dreams. Born Dana Michelle Strain on November 7, 1964. She was adopted as an infant and raised in the San Fernando Valley. She was a talented figure skater before Hollywood came calling. Landing commercials and small roles before Different Strokes made her a household name. But behind the scenes, her life was far from perfect. She started using drugs and alcohol as a young teenager, a problem that would haunt her for the rest of her life. When she became pregnant in 1984, the show wrote her out, and her career never fully recovered. Desperate for work, she took on roles in B-movies and even a controversial video game, Night Trap. Money problems, bad relationships, and legal troubles followed. She was arrested for robbing a video store in 1991 and again for forging a prescription in 1992. Her struggles weren't just about addiction. They were about a young woman who never found stability. Losing her mother, losing her career, and eventually losing custody of her son, Tyler, left her feeling abandoned and hopeless. And though she tried to rebuild her life, the weight of her past was too heavy. When she passed away, many were shocked, but those who knew her story weren't. It felt like Hollywood had chewed up and spit out another young star, leaving behind a cautionary tale. Even more tragic, her son Tyler would follow in her footsteps, taking his own life in 2010. Dana Plato's life was filled with pain, but for those who remember her, she was more than just a tragic figure. She was a young girl who once dreamed of being a star, who brought joy to millions, and who, despite everything, tried to fight her demons until the very end. Brittany Murphy was a bright, talented actress and singer whose life was tragically cut short at just 32 years old on December 20, 2009. Known for her roles in movies like Clueless, 8 Mile, and Girl, Interrupted, she had a career that shined with versatility. But behind the scenes, her final days were filled with mystery, illness, and heartbreaking circumstances. In the weeks leading up to her death, Brittany had been battling flu-like symptoms, and those around her noticed she had become increasingly frail. Living in her Hollywood Hills home with her husband, Simon Monjack, and her mother, she reportedly struggled with severe anemia and a worsening respiratory infection, yet she never sought proper medical treatment. On the morning of December 20th, she collapsed in her bathroom, and by the time paramedics arrived, she was barely clinging to life. They rushed her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but it was too late. Brittany went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead at 10:05 a.m. The autopsy later confirmed that her death was caused by pneumonia, severe anemia, and the effects of multiple medications, none of which were illegal, but together, they took a toll on her already weakened body. The tragedy deepened when, just 5 months later, her husband Simon was also found dead in the same home, from the same causes, pneumonia and severe anemia, fueling endless speculation and conspiracy theories. Some believed toxic mold in their house was to blame, while others questioned the medications in her system. Brittany's father even pursued independent testing, suggesting possible poisoning, but nothing was ever proven. Her mother, devastated, fought off rumors and legal battles, trying to make sense of the unimaginable loss. Brittany had been a rising star from a young age, growing up in New Jersey and later moving to Los Angeles with her mother to chase her dreams. She worked tirelessly to prove herself, landing roles that showcased her infectious energy, comedic timing, and emotional depth. Whether playing the lovable Ty in Clueless, the troubled Daisy in Girl, Interrupted, or voicing Luann Platter on King of the Hill, she had a charm that made her unforgettable. Despite Hollywood's pressures, she remained kind, humble, and full of life. But fame came with its struggles, relentless scrutiny over her weight, whispers of drug use she always denied, and the brutal reality of an industry that often turned its back when she needed support the most. Her sudden, tragic passing left a hole in the entertainment world, a painful reminder of how fragile life can be. To this day, questions still linger about the exact circumstances of her death. But what remains undeniable is her legacy, a talented, kind-hearted woman gone far too soon, leaving behind performances that continue to touch the hearts of millions. Lisa Robin Kelly, the actress best known for playing Lori Foreman on That 70s Show, passed away tragically on August 15, 2013, at just 43 years old. Her life, once full of promise and success, took a heartbreaking turn in her later years, leading to a struggle with addiction that ultimately claimed her. She had voluntarily checked herself into Pax Rehab House in Altadena, California, in an effort to turn things around. But just days after being admitted, she was found unresponsive in her sleep. The coroner later determined that her cause of death was an accidental overdose due to multiple drug intoxication. It was yet another devastating end to a talent lost too soon, a story that has become all too familiar in Hollywood. Lisa's battle with substance abuse had been ongoing for years, and despite moments of hope, she could never fully escape it. Her decline was painfully public. Multiple arrests for DUI and domestic disturbances, allegations of physical altercations, and a tumultuous personal life that included a brief marriage and a troubled relationship with her ex-boyfriend. But before all of this, Lisa was just a young girl from Southington, Connecticut, with dreams of making it big. She pursued those dreams at DePaul University, where she earned a degree in acting, and soon after, she began landing roles in television. Her early career was filled with guest appearances on hit shows like Married, With Children, The X-Files, and Charmed, but it was that 70s show that made her a household name. Playing Lori Foreman, the manipulative yet charming older sister of Eric Foreman, Lisa captivated audiences with her comedic timing and striking on-screen presence. She was set for a long and successful career, but behind the scenes, things weren't as bright. She later admitted that personal tragedy, a miscarriage, pushed her into alcoholism, which ultimately led to her abrupt departure from the show. Though she returned briefly in the 5th season, she was later replaced, and her acting career never recovered. Legal troubles followed, and by 2013, Her life had spiraled into a series of public breakdowns, mugshots, and failed attempts at recovery. But even in her darkest moments, Lisa wanted to fight. She checked into rehab, hoping for a fresh start. Sadly, that new beginning never came. Her death was shocking yet not entirely unexpected to those who knew her struggles. Her manager recalled speaking to her just days before, saying she had been hopeful about her future, believing she was finally on the road to recovery. Instead, her battle ended in the very place meant to save her. Her passing was a stark reminder of the brutal grip of addiction, of how even those who seem to have it all, talent, beauty, success, can still be trapped by demons that refuse to let go. Lisa Robin Kelly's life was a mix of incredible highs and devastating lows, a tale of stardom and suffering, of dreams that came true and then unraveled. She will always be remembered for her iconic role, for the laughter she brought to millions, and for the tragic reality of a life cut short far too soon. Phoebe Snow, the legendary American singer-songwriter and guitarist, known for her soulful voice and timeless hit, Poetry Man, left the world on April 26, 2011, at the age of 60 after suffering a devastating cerebral hemorrhage that led to a long, painful battle with blood clots, pneumonia, and congestive heart failure. Her final days were marked by a deep struggle, as she remained in a coma for over a year, her body slowly succumbing to the complications that followed. It was a cruel twist of fate for a woman whose voice had once soared effortlessly over 4 octaves, who had touched the hearts of millions with her haunting melodies and unmatched vocal power. Phoebe was no stranger to pain. Her life had already been marked by hardship and sacrifice, most notably in her unwavering devotion to her daughter, Valerie, who was born with severe brain damage. Doctors had told her Valerie wouldn't survive long, but Phoebe dedicated herself completely to caring for her, putting her career on hold and making every personal sacrifice imaginable. When Valerie passed away in 2007 at the age of 31, Phoebe's heart was shattered, and though she continued to perform, a part of her never truly recovered. Born as Phoebe Ann Lobb in New York City on July 17, 1950, she grew up in a household filled with music, from Broadway show tunes to Delta blues, shaping her into the artist she would become. She started performing in Greenwich Village clubs, carrying her prized Martin guitar from stage to stage, her voice capturing the attention of anyone who heard it. When she released her self-titled debut album in 1974, featuring the song that would define her career, Poetry Man, she quickly rose to fame, earning a Grammy nomination and solidifying her place in music history. But despite her success, her journey was anything but easy. She never fully embraced the commercial music industry, choosing instead to follow her own artistic path, often struggling with the pressure and expectations that came with fame. Over the years, she lent her voice to countless projects, from recording commercial jingles to collaborating with icons like Paul Simon and Donald Fagen, proving time and time again that her talent was boundless. Yet, behind the scenes, she was dealing with unimaginable loss and personal battles. She turned to Buddhism in her later years, seeking peace in a world that had given her both incredible gifts and unbearable sorrow. Then, in January 2010, the cerebral hemorrhage struck, leaving her in a fragile state. And for over a year, she fought against the odds, just as she had always done in life. But this time, the battle was too much, and on that fateful April day, the world lost one of the most distinctive and powerful voices of a generation. She was cremated, her ashes scattered, leaving behind a legacy of music that continues to inspire. Phoebe Snow was more than just a singer. She was a mother, a fighter, a woman of immense talent and heart, whose life was defined not only by the beauty of her voice, but by the depth of her love and the strength of her spirit. Dorothy Kgallan was a force in American journalism, a columnist who dug deep into the biggest stories of her time. But her relentless pursuit of the truth may have led to her untimely and mysterious death. On November 8, 1965, she was found lifeless in her Manhattan townhouse, slumped in a chair, still dressed from the night before. The official cause was ruled as an accidental overdose of alcohol and barbiturates, but to this day, many believe there was more to it. Just days before, She had confided in friends that she was close to revealing explosive information about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, a case she had pursued relentlessly, interviewing Jack Ruby and gaining access to confidential testimony. Her notes from that investigation vanished after her death, fueling speculation that she had been silenced. Dorothy was no stranger to controversy. Her syndicated column, The Voice of Broadway, ran in over 140 newspapers, blending entertainment gossip with hard-hitting political and crime investigations. She gained nationwide fame as a panelist on the hit TV show What's My Line, where her sharp wit and investigative instincts made her stand out. But long before that, she had already made history, competing in a 1936 round-the-world race, finishing second, and turning the experience into a book. Born in Chicago in 1913, Dorothy grew up in a family of journalists, her father a well-respected Hearst reporter. She followed in his footsteps, becoming one of the most fearless reporters of her era. She covered high-profile trials, including the Sam Shepard case, which later inspired The Fugitive, and she wasn't afraid to challenge powerful figures. But her personal life was complicated. She was in a strained marriage, carried on an affair with singer Johnny Ray, and struggled with alcohol. In the weeks leading up to her death, she was more determined than ever to uncover the truth behind Kennedy's assassination. She told friends she had something big, something that would shake the country. And then, suddenly, she was gone. Her death, though ruled accidental, was riddled with oddities. Her body was found in a room she rarely used, with books she never read placed beside her, and pills she was not known to take in her system. The only person in her home that night was a new hairdresser she had met just days earlier, who vanished after she died. Even the medical examiner's report left open the possibility of foul play. Today, many believe Dorothy was silenced for what she knew, that her death was no accident, but a carefully planned cover-up. Whether that's true or not, her legacy as a fearless journalist who never backed down remains. She exposed corruption, fought for justice, and challenged the official narrative when no one else dared. Dorothy Kgallan lived and died in pursuit of the truth, and the mystery of her final days only adds to the legend of a woman who was never afraid to ask the questions others wouldn't. Phyllis Amanda Peterson, known to the world as Amanda Peterson, was once the fresh-faced, bright-eyed actress who captured hearts in the 1987 film Can't Buy Me Love. But behind the glamour of Hollywood, her life took a tragic turn that led to an untimely and heartbreaking end. On July 3, 2015, just days before her 44th birthday, Amanda was reported missing after failing to show up for a family dinner. When police entered her apartment in Greeley, Colorado, 2 days later, they found her lifeless body. The door was unlocked, and though there were no signs of foul play, the reality of what had happened was devastating. Amanda had died alone, the result of an accidental drug overdose. The official autopsy revealed that a mix of prescription painkillers, including morphine, caused respiratory failure. She had undergone a hysterectomy not long before and had been managing pain with medication, some of which she had obtained from a friend. While her mother insisted she had been drug-free in recent years, her past struggles told a different story. Amanda had battled addiction and mental health issues for years, with multiple arrests between 2000 and 2012 for assault, drug possession, and DUI. At one point, she even spent nearly 3 months in jail. But behind this troubled history lay an even darker truth. Her family later revealed that at just 15, Amanda had been raped, an incident that she kept secret for decades. That trauma, they believed, changed her forever, setting her on a path of trust issues, self-destruction, and a painful retreat from the spotlight. Before all of this, she had been a rising star, a young girl with big dreams who started acting at the age of 7 and quickly became a teen idol. She starred in TV shows like A Year in the Life and movies like Explorers before Can't Buy Me Love made her famous. But Hollywood can be a cruel place, and after a few more roles, she stepped away from the industry in the early 90s. She returned to her hometown, tried college, and lived a quiet life, but the pain she carried never truly left her. She was married twice and had children, but happiness remained elusive. In her final years, Amanda was living alone, receiving disability benefits, and struggling with her health, bouts of pneumonia, sinus infections, and sleep apnea took their toll. Yet, her death came as a shock to those who loved her. Her father, devastated, described her as deeply religious in her later years and believed she had found some peace. But in the end, the pain was too much. Amanda Peterson, once full of life and promise, became another cautionary tale of Hollywood dreams turned into tragedy. Her story is one of incredible talent, unspoken trauma, and a life that ended far too soon. She was more than just a teen star. She was a daughter, a mother, a woman who deserved more from the world. And while she is gone, her legacy remains, forever frozen in time on the silver screen, a reminder of what was and what could have been. Judy Carne, the vibrant and spirited English actress who captured hearts with her infectious energy and signature phrase, "Sock it to me," on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, passed away on September 3, 2015, at the age of 76 due to pneumonia. Her final days were spent in a hospital in Northampton, England, far from the bright lights and laughter that once surrounded her. The woman who had once been the life of the party, the face of a cultural revolution in comedy, found herself living a quiet existence in a small village, a stark contrast to the fame she had once known. Her journey to that moment had been anything but easy, marked by highs of fame and laughter, but also deep valleys of personal struggles, addiction, and tragedy. Born Joyce Audrey Botterill in Northampton on April 27, 1939, she had a passion for dance and performance from a young age, which led her to train at prestigious theatrical schools before making her way into television. Her natural charm and comedic timing earned her roles in British television before she took the bold leap to America, where she quickly became a household name. She landed roles in sitcoms like Fair Exchange and Love on a Rooftop, but it was Laugh-In that catapulted her to stardom. As the mischievous and endlessly charming British girl who always found herself the target of slapstick pranks, she won over audiences with her playful, yet fearless, approach to comedy. However, behind the scenes, her personal life was unraveling. A tumultuous marriage to Burt Reynolds ended in bitter divorce, followed by another short-lived marriage to producer Robert Bergman. While her professional career was struggling, her battles with drug addiction and financial troubles only grew worse. The once celebrated star found herself entangled in heroin addiction, which led to multiple arrests and even time behind bars. In 1978, a car accident left her with a broken neck, a near-fatal moment that should have been a wake-up call. But instead, her downward spiral continued. By the 1980s, she had faded from the spotlight entirely, retreating to England where she lived a reclusive life, far from the fame that once defined her. In her later years, she made brief appearances, including a 25th anniversary special for Laugh-In. But the magic of her youth had long since dimmed. Her autobiography, Laughing on the Outside, Crying on the Inside, told the harrowing truth of her struggles, her battles with addiction, her failed marriages, and the loneliness that accompanied her fame. In the end, her body, weakened by years of substance abuse and hardship, succumbed to pneumonia, and she passed away quietly, a far cry from the dazzling star she once was. Yet, despite the darkness that clouded her later years, Judy Carne will always be remembered for the light she brought to television screens, for her laughter, her charm, and for that unforgettable phrase that made America smile. She may have endured pain, but she left behind a legacy of joy, and in the hearts of those who remember her, she will always be that lively, spirited girl who made the world laugh. Though they are no longer with us, their stories, their art, and their impact remain alive. Let us remember them not just for how they left, but for the unforgettable mark they made on the world. If you found this tribute meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.